there are simple things in our everyday lives that have profound meaning and enduring beauty. I had no idea before arriving there and seeing these paintings and walking through that garden how inspiring, how profound that experience would be. If there's any other place these paintings should be besides Paris, it's San Francisco and the de Young Museum.
Degas, Renoir, Monet, the Musée d'Orsay comes to the de Young.
I'm standing outside the Musée d'Orsay in Paris, home to some of the most famous masterpieces of the Impressionists: Manet, Monet, Renoir, Degas, Van Gogh. We're going inside to uncover the stories behind the treasure paintings. This is the bustling city of Paris, always known for its beauty, its romance, its rich cultural history, and of course, its amazing art. As Napoleon III began rebuilding Paris in the mid-19th century, the Académie des Beaux-Arts was at the forefront of the French art scene, and the Academy expected its artists to conform to strict standards of style and composition, reflecting traditional values, historical subjects, and religious themes.
In the middle of the 19th century, in France, and in large part in and around Paris, France, the current style and preferred style in art was a very tight, painterly, formal, classical style of art. It was very formulaic in its rollout. A style of art that actually was perpetuated by the government and by the kings of France.
With this focus on tradition, the Academy helped artists earn commissions and prestige. But the group that became known as the Impressionists broke with tradition. They were the radicals of their time. They took their work outside and painted impressions of landscapes and contemporary life. They submitted work to the Academy which was considered unfinished.
Historical context was very particular because it was after the war, after the defeat of the French army, and I think all these painters felt the necessity of a kind of rebirth through the painting. You know, and that's why this painting is still so fresh, so revolutionary.
Throughout the early and mid part of the 19th century, painting and sculpture in France and most of Europe was really dictated by the teachers and the formulas found at the École des Beaux-Arts. The annual juried exhibitions that dictated whether you were hot or you were not. The style that was prevalent was very academic, very classical, very tightly painted with absolutely no brushwork in evidence whatsoever. And all of this was supported by really the public and by the governments of the day. But in the 50s and the 60s, there arose in the artistic ranks of Paris and its environs a group of artists who individually and collectively determined that they needed to express their own unique voices in painting. Artists such as Renoir, Frederic Bazille, who then went on to incorporate Monet in their ranks, and Sicily. These were artists who broke out of the studio, as it were, and went to paint en plein air, in the plein air, not laboring over sketches and drawings and producing very finished paintings in their studio. Rather, they went out to capture what they saw in an instant, what was spontaneous, what was real, rather than what was imagined. And so it gave rise to this sort of sensation or this impressionism in painting, very direct reaction, particularly to nature.
Artistry is always a struggle. It has always been in every century, but especially with Impressionists, that was a sort of revolution in the mid-19th century, because they were absolutely not accepted by the Salon.
Their main goal was to represent modernity, their own time, with their own means. We can see Impressionism as a depart from the academic tradition. Because of the novelty of the times, I think we have to see these painters in the right context. It's important to insist on what this painter brought into their practice. Exactly. But we have also to remember that they were all trained in academic studios. And this link to the tradition is very important now to understand the meaning of this painting behind the surface.
I think at first, the work of the Impressionists was considered rather an affront to not just the critic's eye, but really an affront to the general public in some respects. At some of the exhibitions it said small children and pregnant women shouldn't see these pictures because they were so controversial. What that usually meant is that the brushwork was not so polished and pristine, and the subject matter was more riotous, not to mention the color and the use of light. The Impressionists were very interested in light. Light is what it's all about, and how light affected what you saw, affected the shadows. There were virtually no blacks. Greatly influential upon the artist of the 1860s and the 1870s was what I call the modern life that was occurring in Paris. People were living life on the streets. There was a huge infusion of creativity, not only in the literary moment, but in the entertainment world as well. No longer were we doing court paintings or allegorical paintings. It was about capturing the real life and the spirit that was pervasive within the streets of Paris.
When I walked into the Musée d'Orsay and had an up-close and personal encounter with these revolutionary artists, I had the feeling of recapturing a bit of that idealism of my youth. Coming up next, the fathers of Impressionism. A closer look at how Edouard Manet and Claude Monet changed the 19th century art scene.